The topic is higher education at the 21st century, and we are fortunate again to have with us a sociologist from Tennessee State University, Dr. E. Kelly Sanford. And of course, Dr. Sanford, let me reintroduce this idea that we've talked about. And what I'd like for you to do during this final segment is sort of give us some directions in terms of making higher education accessible to people during the 21st century. What are some of the things that we have to do, and why is it necessary that we do these things? I guess we might.
Okay. And that's a very important question for us to be able to deal with. I think a number of possibilities are there. One, I think we have to be very conscious as a nation, as different ethnic groups, even the dominant group, that the importance of higher education in the 21st century, and that we all need it because we are living in this telecommunications society in comparison to when we lived in a more rural type of society. So it's very important. Now there's a little twist to it. I feel, particularly for the African American community, we have to be very parent involved with preparing our students in elementary school, junior high school, and high school for that next level of entering into an institution of higher education. And that preparation has to be very student-parent oriented, to the point where the parent is playing the role as teacher and being very involved with that student, because grades are very important. Doing well on test scores for SAT, ACTs to go in is very important. And what we find is that there's this gap still this last year between European Americans and African Americans, so the question becomes why. And I think there's this legacy that has always been there. If I may just very quickly give a metaphor of a track meet. And if you have a relay going on, if you have someone running 3 laps and then let the other group start, and they are 3/4 of the way finished, and then at the end you are asking the question, well, why didn't you come in first place? And so this has been the legacy of the Holocaust of African enslavement for such a long period of time. And so with that familiarity, we now have to be very parent, teacher oriented towards students and get them ready with certain type of remedial types of education, using our institutions of the church and religion to help prepare students for this 21st century higher education, any avenue possible. Now, we have to be very clear about some of the goals that are important. Coming out of high school, one must know, entering, that there's this goal of critical thinking, of listening, of writing, of reading, of being very sensitive to cultural diversity, some of the issues that you've already raised today, understanding numbers, understanding local, national, regional, and now global type of history is very important. When you think of Dr. Carter G. Woodson and his classic piece entitled The Miseducation of the Negro, was important at that time when he wrote it, and it's just as important today, that we must, within this African-American, say, parent-teacher relationship, understand that legacy that we knew in the past, and understand it, because our school system might give us a certain amount of information, but then it's going to be on us to learn both levels. That's what Dr. Du Bois talks about when he talks about the two-ness in his classic piece entitled The Soul of Black Folks. We have to be both American and African American. So when you think about Dr. L.I.D.'s classic piece at Tennessee State University and his contribution for the African American Studies Department, that is there as an infrastructure, if you will, to help students to recapture this legacy of this history and become whole people again as they enter into an institution of higher learning. So it's very important.
You know, you mentioned the fact of the parent-student kind of involvement.
Yes.
But now, what would happen to those young people? What about those young people who really don't have that kind of parental involvement? And in so many instances, what about the parents themselves who might not be as familiar with the kind of thing that you're talking about? I mean, what do we do in terms of trying to reach this particular group of young people?
That's why I mentioned our churches. I think churches and programs like yours will hopefully better educate. What we are finding in the data is that regardless of social class, in many instances within the African American community, we still have this gap between African Americans and European Americans within these test scores. So while we have moved up economically, occupationally, and even educationally within our parents, we are still not taking that time that is needed with our children to place that emphasis on reading, that emphasis on spending time learning math. So it's this whole notion of that socialization process in learning that is needed there. And I would strongly recommend that we give some very strong thought to that. It's just important today as we are talking about it, as it will be at the end of the 21st century to do the same types of things. Now, that said, the African American community has always valued education. You know, from an earlier time period when we were enslaved, that mother and father always felt that that next generation would be better. So that's always been a strong value. But now we are dealing with some, in this telecommunications society, a point in time where we have to be very conscious of that we need to be very in tune as far as parent being a teacher and teachers being teachers and helping students to learn these new goals and objectives as far as higher education is concerned. So I hope that our churches can be very important. You know, talk shows like this to have educators to come in and to talk about it. Hopefully the churches can come up with innovative programs to help even pre-kindergartners start to learn about this all the way up to college, and they're ready and they're prepared.
You know, one of the great controversies, I think, Doctor, is we've got about 4 minutes, and I certainly want to see if we can take advantage of your knowledge in reference to this, has been this whole issue of Washington on the one hand and Du Bois on the other hand, and this whole conflict in terms of which is the best form of education for African Americans, etc. Looking at education in the 21st century, what would you say to African American young people today about what their desires ought to be in terms of getting this higher education? Should they be involved in technology, or should they be involved in speak to it from that
Absolutely, and as we all may very well know about that great debate between Du Bois and Booker T. Washington. Booker T. Washington, of course, felt that we should go out and learn technical skills, you know, be involved in agriculture, learn some type of a skill. And Du Bois felt, on the other hand, that we should be intellectuals. We should free our minds, emancipate our minds from that enslavement process. And I think today in this 21st century, we were talking to them both. If they were sitting here with us, I think they would agree that we need both. That we need this higher education and emancipate our minds, thinking about Akbar's piece on the psychological aspect of enslavement. We need to free ourselves from that, as well as learn the technology. So Du Bois' piece on education speaks to that very phenomenon. In the speech that he gave, he talked about how we have to learn to be able to be intellectuals as well as learn this new technology. And so I think we at this crossroads now, being able to do both, because we are living in a very technical area. Things are changing as rapidly as we are talking, so we must learn that. But how do we learn it? It's through an institution of higher education. And that emancipates our mind to be able to be the innovators, not only the learning how to do it, but how to create it. And so I think that is very important. And a place like Tennessee State University and other historically African American universities, as well as majority universities, are there for this purpose.
You know, let's have you make a statement to some of our young people who might be watching this show this morning but have no idea of going to a higher education, etc. What would you say over the next 2 minutes to encourage them to go to higher education, and how very, very important it is that they receive a higher education degree?
Now, I think you raise a very important question. We think sociologically in terms of deferred gratification and immediate gratification. And when you defer your gratification, you're talking about giving up some of the material things you might want to have coming out of high school and going into an institution of higher learning, getting that degree, learning from every class that you are taking, majoring in something, and when you come out, your income and opportunities will be far more than they would have been if you had just stayed in high school and finished. You will make more, you have a much more opportunity to make double or triple the amount, and then possibly go on and get a master's degree or PhD. So I encourage all young people to think in terms of continuing their education in any area, but to continue. That's the important thing.
And what would you say to that small group that might wish to do so? Might have the SATs and et cetera, but somehow feel that they don't have the financial resources to do so. Is there some resource for them?
Absolutely. I think in this day and age, you can always find some type of resources through scholarships, through other types of funds after you work studies, teaching assistantships after you get at the institution. There are always innovative ways of doing it, and I would like to encourage you again to go, because the legacy of Harriet Tubman, of Frederick Douglass, and all that came before us wanted us to have this opportunity, so now we have to take advantage of it.
If they've got the ability and the desire, you're telling them that they can find some kind of financial resources so that they might be able to compete in higher education.
Absolutely.
Is that what we're saying?
That's what we are saying. And if you work hard on some of those suggestions that I gave you earlier, there will be scholarships there available for you.
Very good. And of course, Dr. Sanford, let me thank you for giving us that excellent information about higher education at the 21st century. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning.